Hey, True Believers, Englentine here, and I'm with Eric, back issue Breen.
Good evening, kids.
All right, so we are here to talk about the top 10 Superman artists, and I'm going to put quotation marks around 10 because we may talk about more. We're definitely probably mention more than 10, and this is going to be a little bit different because I think every one of these artists are excellent in their own right. So I don't want to go 10, 9, 8, 7 because I don't know. Just I think it would be proper. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about artists and so forth and so on.
And what he means is we're going to be employing conference team math here, where the Big 10 has 14 teams and the Big 12 has 10.
That does not make sense to me at all.
That's why they're in college.
Yeah. Right offhand, though, if you are talking about the best artists of Superman, you have to at least speak a little bit about Schuster. I mean, without Schuster, you don't get any more Superman artists.
It's a short list.
Yeah. So whether or not you actually like the art from the original Superman stories, he deserves that kind of respect at the very least.
Absolutely.
Well, I kind of was leaving it open for you to take the ball on that one.
All right. Well, no, you summed it up pretty well. Now, if you applied even 50s and 60s standards to Joe Shuster, would he be in the top 10? No. But compared to other art of that era, his art fit that era perfectly, and his art got better as he went on, and it fit the character for those early days.
Okay, let me ask you a question. What do you think of the original Shield? Because if you look at this means hope, and on Earth it means it's an S. If you look at that, it really does not look the same. It looks like a shield on Superman's chest in the original stories and everything. The coloring is just a little bit off. You could tell, they didn't quite have who Superman was going to be at that point, obviously, since it was the first time he saw. But what did you think of that original look?
Well, again, you're putting that in. I mean, it was the late 30s. Mm-hmm. No comic art was really sophisticated, and most of the better known characters were guys wearing tuxedos with opera capes or just a pair of leotards.
The drop mask.
Yeah, so that was a early prototypical superhero costume, and they had some kinks to work out as they went.
But that's why when I'm talking about Schuster, I really want to speak in a honorary term. He's the guy who drew him first. He's the guy who created Superman. Another honorary, but in my opinion, he's on the list. He's on my list, Eric. But you might think we have to put him honorary because they're not in comics, but that's got to be Max and Dave Fleischer. These cartoons, I have a big box set of Superman movies, and all the cartoons are there, and I've seen them, and they are fan-freaking-tastic. And by the way, this, I believe, is the first time we saw Superman fly.
Up in the sky, look!
It's a bird!
It's a plane! It's Superman!
I think you might be right there, because these were 1941. Mm-hmm. And I think he was still leaping tall buildings in a single bound up to that point.
Yeah, the shading in these films, it was almost like I think they did do it the same way they did the Batman series, where they were drawing it on black paper, and it looks amazing. You look at this animation, all I think of is this is so far ahead of its time.
I think animation in general was more painstakingly done in those days because it was there was no television yet, so you were competing with the movies. Mm-hmm. You look at some of those old Disney Disney movies like Fantasia, for example, and I know the Fleischers also did Popeye.
Yeah,
and it's just I think they used a 12 ratio, or 12 frames per second, and the time spent on each frame. It's anybody that hasn't seen these cartoons, you're doing yourself a disservice. You
Absolutely.
get a hold of them, watch them. I try to get them out and watch them at least once a year.
I love there's a I know you know the one I'm talking about, but there's a building falling into another building and Superman lands on the side and and you can actually see the strain in his neck, everything as he's picking the building back up and everything. Of course, the famous scene, the one that gets played anytime anybody mentions a Fleischer cartoon, which is the one where he's flying and he's actually hitting the laser beam.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, so there are a lot of iconic scenes from these things.
And Lois, what a femme fatale.
Yes, Lois Lane, before the comics code messed her up. A lot of people don't know this because they just know Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, where she's like, oh, I hope he marries me. Clark, stay away. But before that, she was really a Girl Friday.
Kent, you help Lois follow up her lead. She may have an angle on this thing.
Yes, sir.
But, Chief, I'd like the chance to crack the story on my own.
Well, no.
Thanks, Chief.
But Lois.
She was the smart, quick-talking reporter that thankfully they recreated when John Byrne came around. But yeah, she got destroyed by the comics code. But they had the Fleischer one. Yeah, the Fleischer one had the hard-nosed reporter.
And this was before the mild-mannered reporter from a great metropolitan newspaper persona had been set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
This Clark had some stones. So that's another thing about this cartoon. He was kind of a badass, both, in the three-piece and the Superman suit.
Okay, now the thing is while we're talking about this, in all honesty, we're going by memory. We're not holding up comics. I don't have everything around me here to reference Superman. So a lot of this is from memory. I might embarrass myself again because I do have to ask. Didn't he have at one point in time? Didn't he have a black logo? Is that yes, he did.
Superman.
Which it brought up with the Kingdom Come thing. So Alex Ross must have been inspired when Superman went dark, because instead of yellow behind the S, it was black, just adding to the depth of the character and the depth of the art. It's just wow. I want to watch the cartoons now. I want to sit back. Aren't they in public domain? Some of these have to be in public domain except for the trademark. Let's watch a couple. That would be really cool. Okay. So I do know there's a couple of great comic book artists that were born at this time. Would you like to talk about one that one of the earlier greats?
Well, okay, if we're going in somewhat chronological order,
I think we are. Why not?
I'm going to put these three gentlemen together.
Okay.
Win Mortimer, Wayne Boring, and Al Plastino. They handled the lion's share of the art on the Superman books during the 40s and 50s. They were they were who got us from Schuster to Swan, more or less. Now, steady, not spectacular, and you would recognize Wayne Boring the first time you see one of his panels, because when Superman takes off, he always has one leg lifted and the other one straight, and has that was his trademark.
This bit
go-to pose.
Yeah.
So these guys, as I said, did the heavy lifting to get the character through those 2 decades. And I think if I had to pick one of the three, I would say Wayne Boring.
Wayne Boring. Yeah.
Despite the stock pose, I would say he's the best of the three. And Kurt Swan took that pose and made it his own for years after that. But I also want to mention Kurt Schaffenberger.
Okay.
He was kind of like the Kurt Swan understudy, I guess you could say, and did a lot of the stuff that I guess he didn't have time for. Again, very simple style, probably better looked at through a historical perspective, because quite frankly, if he were doing that kind of art today, I don't think he could get hired. But for the time, he was a serviceable artist, and that's really all you needed in those days. And yes, now we can talk about Jose Luis Garcia Lopez.
Alrighty. There is actually a guy on Twitter, by the way, who loves Jose Garcia Lopez art, and he posts it every so often. This is
I've seen. I'd say his heyday was probably mid-70s through the crisis.
okay. Well, thank you, because I got to admit, if you get past my age of understanding, then I'm like, okay, wait a second. This guy was there. This guy was there. So this is the Superman I grew up with, essentially. And this is the one that ended up on the underoos. This is the one that ended up on the t-shirts and basically anything that you had licensed from Superman in the 70s. This was the guy that represented Superman to you. And to me, it's you'll look at the art, it's very simple yet dynamic. If those two things could actually ever be on the same piece of art, it would have I would pick his Superman, or actually his entire run of the Justice League, Super Friends, the whole 9 yards.
I agree with that, and I do get what you're saying about that, because he can make poses that other artists weren't using or weren't doing or didn't have the ability to do, but you always knew where everybody was. Sometimes an artist can get so fancy that like when Bill Sienkiewicz was doing his acid trip art, or whatever you want to call it. Lopez was always crisp, always dynamic, and not only just Superman, and not only just for that era. If you see licensed stuff from DC to this day, if it's not 40s, replicas, it's Lopez. I mean, if you see those collector's tins that you sent Maranya and Iron Man, there's one of the Justice League, it's him. The Batman, it's him. Superman, it's him. He's the quintessential DC artist for that decade, 75 to 85.
Yeah, he's absolutely, like I said, he's absolutely the one that I grew up with, hands down. Easiest to recognize, almost. But after him, you said up to Crisis, which would bring John Byrne.
Well, I said George Perez.
That's right, George Perez. He was doing the Justice League at the time.
Yeah, and he did. He was doing a lot of things, and he, as everybody knows, he did do the art in the Crisis. And his, now, if you want to put artist lists together for any character, that man's going to be on it, because my God, no one could draw a room full of people like George.
That
Perez.
is true. And by the way, that's who we're looking at right here.
Yes.
That's George Perez Superman. This is from the JLA Avengers crossover. It's a mouse pad with it on. I was like, hell's to the yeah, I'm getting that.
and he was given the art assignment on Action Comics after they went away from the weekly formula. And when they were back to doing the 3 Superman books, he was the artist on that for a while. He was the first Superman artist on the New 52. Not the action, but Superman. Unfortunately, that did not end well. But yeah, so his time drawing Superman spanned decades, and no true Best of Superman artist would be complete without him.
I absolutely agree, but I will so back up you saying what you said is George Perez is in the top 10 of damn near every character, because he's drawn literally every character. Well, obviously not literally, but just in JLA. Sure? Yeah, I know, right? JLA Avengers literally does, I can use that word this time, literally has everybody who was an Avenger or a Justice League member up to that point. Mm-hmm. So he did do a whole bunch. Now, did he do literally every character? I don't know, but if there is an MF version of Captain Marvel out there that's done by George Perez, I would get that. Split. There's my hand. I think that would be a damn good time. For as much as I read Superman beforehand, and of course Super Friends and the whole yarn, who would be the artist on Super Friends? Because that's another one that has to be brought up.
Wasn't Ramona Fraden the artist on some of those?
I don't know. I know there's a whole bunch of them. But yeah, because they're what a lot of kids in the 1970s thought of as Superman as well. Yeah, as much as I loved and I read Superman beforehand, I made sure I caught every issue as soon as Man of Steel came up by by John Byrne. When John Byrne's Man of Steel came out, I became a fan. It's not just, oh yes, I like Superman, I read Superman. I was a fan, and by that I mean in the classical sense of the word. Fan is short for fanatic. That's where it comes from. That's why I don't buy into this. That casual person who walks into the store goes, oh, I like Batman, and walks out, and people are like, he's a fan too. No, he's not. It means fanatic. You're not a fan without that attic part that you can attach to it. Stripped all of the excess fat off of Superman because it seemed like DC Comics wanted Superman to be the most powerful hero. So if the Flash could do it, Superman could do it, and he had freaking super ventriloquism, Eric. The hell, seriously, I could throw my voice across the world. It's to the point where you could actually believe that Superman 4 crap where he's staring at the Great Wall of China, putting it back with his eyes. Yeah, it was ridiculous. But John Byrne, and I'm just talking about story right here, but John Byrne just cut the fat, said these are Superman's powers. This is what we're going with. Go. Did a great story, but he also managed to take everything that Superman was up to that point and draw it in the perfect figure. I think if you look at the Weisingers, if you look at Swan and all that kind of stuff, you can find a piece of everything in John Byrne's Superman.
I'll buy that. And that 6-issue miniseries kind of took you on a tour through all of that. Yeah, if you like, even the last issue, the Krypton issue. Krypton,
yes.
Neither I nor my wife will leave Krypton.
Yeah, and while we're mentioning Byrne, and like I said, it was so dynamic because Byrne, you could tell that was an absolute passion of his, and he really gave the art his all, as well as the story. But I do want to mention as an aside that another artist that should get some credit for that revival is Jerry Ordway.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought him up because in all honesty, I had Dan Jurgens down and he had just slipped my mind. Thank goodness. Yes, absolutely. Because after John Byrne left and they kind of went to, if you remember, they went to a weekly schedule on Superman, not where it would be like Superman every week, but it would be like Superman, then Action, and then Man of Steel. And then they came up with, I think, one called Man of Tomorrow, even that was supposed to be one every 3 months where it would get that extra weekend or something like that.
There's Superman Action, Adventures of Superman, and Superman Man of Steel. Man of Tomorrow was for the skip weeks if they didn't have a special lined up. Right. So you had the diamond boxes with 1 through 52. And that didn't even cover all the Superman books for that year.
No.
Because sometimes the annuals were
and it would be so I would say like 1990, and then it would have number 30. And it would be chapter 30 of the year. I know a lot of people complained about that. I thought that was brilliant.
I miss that to this day.
I know. I wish and here's the reason why I loved it. The continuity was tight.
Yes.
So if Superman was out in space in Adventures of Superman, he wasn't sitting at home with Lois Lane in Action Comics. He was still in space, and you may actually have an issue that was dealing with Bebo and and Ma and Pa Kent. but damn, you were getting a full story of not just Superman, but the whole world that revolved around, which is one of the reasons you and I had to make that video about the fact that they don't have side characters anymore. There's no supporting. But that's that story, and we're on art. Jerry Ordway, I thought, really drew a tight Superman, almost. If I remember correctly, it's almost like a svelte Superman. It wasn't exactly like an Ed McGuinness kind of big barrel chest doom. So he went off the reservation a little bit as far as that's concerned, because a lot of people, when they draw Superman, he's big barrel chest kind of guy.
Well, it was a contrast because Byrne was doing 2, Ordway was doing 1.
Mm-hmm.
So it was definitely a different look, but faces were the same, the hairstyles were the same. I mean, they took the time to do that, which is something you don't see today.
No, not at all. And I mentioned I hate that. If Catwoman's going to have high cheekbones, let's make sure she always has high cheekbones.
Let's settle for the same hairstyle.
There you go. Yeah, I know, right? Since we're talking about the greats, I don't know if I would include Ed McGuinness as a great. What do you think about that? Should he be on this list? Should we be talking about Ed McGuinness? I say as I bring up Ed McGuinness. Personally,
no. But I do have a list that I will mention in between the last one and Kurt Swan is honorable mentions, and there will be artists. There'll be one artist in particular who is better than any artist we will be talking about, but he only rates an honorable mention due to the body of work or brevity of it. So that's kind of where I will slot McGuinness, and with this other group of artists that I will mention.
See, I've got one that I want to bring up that absolutely falls into that as well, because I know for a fact not a lot of people like his art. But I will talk about the guy who blew me away after I looked at his art and went, "Wow, this sucks." I'm serious. The first time I saw his art, I was like, "This is horrible." It was in Man for All Seasons. The man's name is Frank Quietly, and he draws this big, thick kind of Clark Kent. He draws a big, thick kind of Superman and round faces, the whole 9 yards. I was looking, wow, this is really bad. This is pretty damn good. One thing I've got to say, one of the reasons why I think it is I think he's got a way of making Superman even, he has a way of making him look powerful just standing there. There's one issue of All-Star Superman, by the way, he's the artist on that. And he really only blows me away with these 2 books. So that's why I mentioned him. It might be an honorable mention that I'm bringing up. But I do think he draws Superman with a great sense of power. And you can see that in All-Star Superman throughout. But there's an issue where Parasite is coming for him. Lex Luthor thinks Parasite's trying to get Lex Luthor because Superman's in his Clark Kent disguise, or he's dressed as Clark Kent. Superman's the disguise for him. And at times you see the difference between how, even in comic books, how Clark Kent is foppish and how Superman, when he turns around to actually battle Parasite, is super, even if he's wearing different clothing. And I like that, and I started really enjoying Frank Quietly's art on Superman because of it.
It's strange. I passed on All-Star Superman when it first came out because I was still a little salty over the fact that they'd done away with all of the Byrne, Superman. But I went back and I've read the first half of it only because I haven't been able to get a hold of the second half yet. And I agree with you. There's something magical about that series that I really wish I had been there from the get-go on that, because I definitely missed out on one of the greatest Superman stories ever told, and I'm only halfway through it now.
It's an amazing story, and the art, like I said, the first time I saw the art on A Man for All Seasons, I was like, wow, they drew Superman kind of goofy, but by the end of it, I'm like all into it. And it may just be a specialty thing. It may just be for these two stories. So maybe I'll put Frank Quietly in the honorable mentions as well. But at least he's getting mentioned at all. So
Well,
yeah.
no, I can see him having a place there, because that's when you talk about one, the greatest Superman stories, and for someone that's been around for as long as he has, I mean, that the Batman list is a hell of a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
All-Star Superman is on the Superman list, so the artist of that I could see putting on that list. And real quickly, for another name that I don't want to get lost to time, and although he didn't do a whole lot of art, he did so much of the inking in those days and everybody he inked, you could tell when this man did it, and that's Murphy Anderson.
Okay.
He did a lot of inking for Kurt Swan, and for I'm believe he went back to maybe even the tail end of the 50s with I guess it would have been Boring by that time.
Are there any hot and good modern day Superman artists?
Ivan Rice.
Oh, yes, Ivan Rice. He does. Yeah. He was on Justice League for a while. He got Superman. And it's like, oh my goodness gracious. Now it's John Romita Jr.
No, he will not be making this list. We're getting close to the end of this, so we did mention Dan Jurgens.
Yes.
And
I mentioned him in passing, but I kind of skipped over him there.
He did a lot of Superman art, including the death of Superman. So
Yep.
his place in Superman lore is
cemented forever. Yeah, he is. And once again, he's part of that time where, I tell you the truth, I was buying every damn issue, anything Superman. Just give it to me.
Yeah, I guess at this point, I want to mention, give a few honorable mentions. But we'll start with Neil Adams. Although he never did an issue of Superman and did a few issues of World's Finest Comics, which is one of the rare times he did Superman sequentially. Some of his covers, starting with issue 233, where he's breaking the chains, and he was the cover artist on a lot of the books during the Kryptonite No More saga in the 240s. Some of those covers, are just homaged to death to this day. But the one that, and I really hope you can find a scan of this to show while I'm blathering about it.
Okay.
317, where he's just been bathed in kryptonite, and he's got his hands into fists, and he goes, "The kryptonite is killing me, but before I die, I'm taking you with me." Might be the most powerful cover I've ever seen, and it's just like from the chest up, and you'll recognize it as soon as you see, oh yeah, I remember that. Alex Ross, for obvious reasons, all the painted.
Yeah, he also draws a big barrel chest, a sharp nose for some reason, but at least he makes him good looking.
Gary Frank, for his, if for nothing else, for that Legion of Superheroes storyline he did in Action Comics in 2007. I was never a huge fan of him drawing his face to look like Christopher Reeve, but other people seem to like it.
Yeah, but I can see that.
Ed McGuinness, again, did a lot of work in the early 2000s. So, and not an opinion I share, but he seems to have a decent sized fan base.
I like his work on Batman, Superman a lot better than I did on his Superman, because after a while, it really became cartoonish.
Yeah. Jim Lee, the storyline he did in the Superman book with
Man of Tomorrow, I think it was, or something like that.
Yeah, it was it was a series within a series in Superman from like 206 to 217.
Yeah, I have it behind me in absolute form somewhere. Yeah. But I got to say this though before you move on.
Sure.
As far Jim Lee to me is almost like what we were saying about George Perez. He really does not do any character badly.
No, he doesn't. He just, unfortunately, these days doesn't do any characters. Seems like. I do want to mention Gil Kane. He, again, more of a green, certainly at DC, far better known as a Green Lantern artist. But in the early 80s, when DC was attempting to make Superman matter, on Action Comics, they brought Marv Wolfman over. So he was doing Teen Titans and Action Comics. Gil Kane was put on art. They split Clark Kent into two beings, but they couldn't live without each other. So they were dying. And so and like Lord Satanish was behind the chicanery, but Kane was pretty far into his career by this point, but I thought the art was tremendous. And I know there's some covers out there where he's gotten to draw Superman. And so, this person I'm going to mention for one story, but man, was it a good story. Art Adams, Action Comics Annual #1.
Every time I've had that on the auction a couple times, you keep saying this is
and one day it's going to sell.
One day, the speculators are going to be like, it's in a movie. They're going to put Superman in a movie finally.
They're going to put Skeeter the Vampire Girl in the movie. Boom.
Yeah, and then Action Comics Annual #1 goes crazy, right? I mentioned we weren't going to do a list, but just by omitting them to talk about them later, are we saying that this is the greatest Superman artist of all time?
In the same way that I will say that Jack Kirby is the greatest Marvel artist, as far as art itself, no, but for what the contribution, the overall contribution,
what we'll say the most iconic.
There you go.
There you go.
Good
He
compromise.
Is the most iconic. I talked about Jose Garcia Lopez being the guy that merchandised the 1970s, basically. However, Kurt Swan, everything you know about Superman, it's a Kurt Swan drawing. It just is. It really is. He's the one that said, no, guys, you got it wrong. Superman looks like this. And from then on, every picture of Superman is some sort of derivative of a Kurt Swan drawing.
And it's a testament to how well he was thought of, that when after the crisis, when obviously they were moving away from that Superman, they thought enough of him to give him the 2-page insert in Action Comics Weekly. So he was the artist on the 2-page Superman story that was like the centerfold of those issues.
But it's true. The curl, the way the S look, the look, the way the shield looked, everything you know and love. Obviously, there was set out beforehand, but he became the company style. We want you to draw Superman like this, and they would actually hire artists who could draw to make it look like Kurt Swan's Superman, or to make sure that everybody had a way of doing things. So when you saw him, you went, "That's it." And that's one of the reasons why it was derivative. They had an in-house style.
Now, he was a product of an era where you would look at a comic book page, it would have 6 or 9 panels, almost exclusively. And his art just, it was real easy to follow. I mean, as far as, we throw the word storytelling around a lot these days. His was never dynamic. But again, it was easy to follow it. And remember, in his career, he worked for a company that aimed at very young children. So it might not have been important to see what, that might have been all that was asked of him. And, unfortunately, we'll never know if there was more to him if he'd been given an opportunity. I mean, he definitely was just steady. He's like the alarm clock. It's going to go off in the morning, and that Kurt Swan's art's going to be exactly what you expect it to be.
All right, so we're going to close out with one question. I want you to answer it as honest as possible. Doesn't matter. There is no wrong answer. Of all the ones we've mentioned, or even if there's somebody you haven't mentioned and went, aha, wait a second, who was your favorite? Like, who would you put on the pinnacle?
John Byrne.
John Byrne? He was the artist that made me truly love Superman.
No character has ever had, to me, in 45 years of reading this stuff, no character's ever undergone a metamorphosis that I liked better than what was done